It's another Acoustic Alternatives podcast from Grove Studios in Ypsilanti, the home of the podcast since I started in the fall of 2020. You remember the pandemic, don't you? They reached out to me and said, we need somebody to do this podcast in our studio to let people know we have a podcast studio. I'm like, oh, sure, okay. Anyway, it's been going on for quite a while. I've had 70-some guests in the studio. If you're new to the podcast because you stumbled into it because of my guest, I'm honored that you're here. A lot of people joined me also when I went to Jeff Daniels' home and did a podcast with him about his latest project. So if you're a fan of other people that you know, you'll find some of those within the podcast, but you'll also find some of the best Michigan singer-songwriters because we're based in Michigan, and it's quite easy to get a hold of some of the finest talent in town here. So again, thanks to Grove Studios in Ypsilanti. If you're a musician in the area, this is a place you can come and practice 24/7. It's available for pretty low prices and a keypad operation. So if 1 a.m. is best for you, they don't mind. My guest on the podcast today, a very special one for me. In 1991 or 92, my memory's a little fuzzy. While listening to the Canadian radio station 89X, I heard a song called Be My Yoko Ono by the Bare Naked Ladies. And my relationship with this band and this songwriter began. I've seen him perform with that band, I believe, 13 times and 2 times as a solo/trio, as the headliner, as not part of the band. And that's brought him to the attention of millions of fans across the globe. Me being one for a rather long time. Stephen Page is here.
John, thanks for having me here.
I am so happy to have you. This is quite an honor for me, and welcome to Ypsilanti. I don't think you've ever visited Ypsilanti, Ann Arbor, yes?
We played Eastern Michigan University. Is that what's here?
Yes,
yeah,
it is.
We played there once.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
we played everywhere in this fine state, just about. Oh, maybe not so much in the UP, but otherwise pretty well down in the mainland.
Okay. In the upper part of lower Michigan, there's Interlochen, which is probably a place you have played.
Right, and yeah, for sure. Isn't that where they do like the music camp and stuff
yes,
like that? Yeah.
Yes. So, well, I know Michigan's a favorite of your former band, and I know that your base of fans is pretty strong here. I don't know if you know this. I'm sure you don't. I own 18,000-ish CDs.
Ooh.
Yes. I have rated most of them. It's something I do as kind of a geeky thing, so I can have a spreadsheet of like, what is my favorite album, right? So that's the only way I can tell. And Gordon of the 18,000 is in my top 15 of all time.
That's amazing.
Among all the other records I've listened to in my lifetime. So
I'm honored.
Well, you sing most of it.
Well, we were kids when we made that record. I mean, I was 21 when we made it. I was actually, I had become obsessed with the fact that I wanted that record to come out while I was still 21. I don't know why that was the thing. I think it's because I found out that Haircut 100's whatever that for Pelican West came out when Nick Hayward was 21, and I was like, well, I gotta beat that. I don't know why. Randomly, I decided that was the thing, and it came out I think 3 weeks after I turned 22. But we're trying to make a record that was very eclectic. It was like had all the things that were like the records I loved, everything from, Frankie Goes to Hollywood to Sgt. Pepper's, as far as like just being a whole bunch of different styles all in one record. So it's nice that still lasts for people.
It does. It still holds up. I just listened to it actually in the last week. I did a deep dive, so I was listening to everything I hadn't heard in a while. The album's full of pop culture references that, if you haven't heard the record, shame on you, but it has clever lyrics. And I knew when I heard it that you were someone like me, even though I'm a few years older than you. But the references on the record, House Martins, one of my favorite bands at the time, Rush, Duran Duran, Vince Guaraldi, Styx. I think The Who is in there somewhere, if I remember correctly. And even my favorite band as a preteen, The Beatles, through the Yoko Ono song. So there's all these things that I was like huge fans of, and it's plugged into this record in really fun ways. And even the fact that you mentioned Stairway to Heaven as the last song of a dance, I didn't realize that wasn't just a thing that happened in my area. You made me realize that happens in your area, where you're from.
We didn't fully realize that things that happened in our area didn't happen in other areas.
Well,
so
for sure.
And then that became kind of part of the style, the ethic, the ethos of the band was like to be ourselves unwaveringly. So like, for instance, we sing about Kraft dinner, which is what Canadians call Kraft mac and cheese.
Sure.
in the box. So that's the thing people threw at us all the time. And when we sang If I Had $1 Million.
Is there some in your guitar still?
Oh, I think there might be. This guitar's been around just about as long. So, but I remember we would go to the UK and the record company would say, they don't have Kraft dinner here. Maybe you should sing pot noodle or something. And we're like, nah.
Doesn't roll off the tongue.
Well, people they didn't tell men at work to change the word Vegemite or whatever else. Like all those things, those references to the band's culture, like where they came from. We knew that our culture was pretty ordinary suburban white bread kind of culture. We thought that was funny. But like anything like that, when in a Beatles song or or a hip hop song or a country song, they tell you about that place and they make it relatable. So that was like always the thing, was just to be, to reference the things that we knew. And so at a school dance, that was it. They ended the dance with Starway to Heaven.
So did we, for some reason. I don't know why.
It's a terrible slow dance.
It is
song.
a slow dance.
You're supposed to have a slow dance, and then it goes to the fast part.
What the heck? Anyway. Fun stuff. Well, that's the past. We're in the present now. We might talk about the past a little bit more, but I think since you've got a guitar and you've got a great voice, what song would you like to sing?
Well, why don't we do something from Gordon? Since we're talking about the first album first, we can move on past that. I'll do... we'll do a song from there. It's called What a Good Boy. When I was born, you looked at me and said, what a good boy, what a smart boy, what a strong boy. When you were born, they looked at you and said, what a good girl, what a smart girl, what a pretty girl. Got these chains hanging around our necks, people wanna strangle us with them before we take our first breath. Afraid of change, afraid of staying the same. When temptation calls, we just look away. This name is the hair shirt I wear. This hair shirt is woven from your brown hair. This song is the cross that I bear. Bear with me, bear with me, bear with me. Be with me tonight. I know that it isn't right, but be with me tonight. Go to school, write exams. If I pass, if I fail, if I drop out, does anyone give a damn? And if they do, they'll soon forget, 'cause it won't take much for me to show them my life ain't over yet. Wake up scared, I wake up strange, I wake up wondering if anything in my life is ever gonna change. I wake up scared, I wake up strange, and everything around me stays the same. It's the hair shirt I wear, and this hair shirt is woven from your brown hair. This song is the cross that I bear. Bear with me, bear it with me, bear with me. Be with me tonight. I know that it isn't right. Ooh. But be with me tonight. I couldn't tell you that I was wrong. Chicken down from the pen and the paper, sat down and I wrote this song. I couldn't tell you were right, so instead I looked in the mirror, watched TV, laid awake all night. Oh, we've got these chains hanging around our necks, people wanna strangle us with them before we take our first breath. Afraid of change, afraid of staying the same when temptation calls. This name is the hair shirt I wear, and this hair shirt is woven from your brown hair. This song is the cross that I bear. Bear with me, bear it with me, bear it with me. Be with me tonight. And when I was born, they looked at me and said, what a good boy, what a smart boy, what a strong boy. And when you were born, they looked at you and said, what a good girl, what a smart girl, what a pretty girl, hey, yeah. What a pretty girl, hey, yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, da, 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 da.
Thank you. I mean, I can die happy now. If I'm not correct, from some of my recent rewatching and re-listening to everything, that is a song that the man you're on tour with loves, Billy Bragg. Is that correct?
He did tell me that. We in 1992, we did a show in London. It was like part of some Americana festival or something that was going on. We were opening for the great Mary Margaret O'Hara, singer-songwriter from Canada, sister of Catherine O'Hara. People will know her, but she's just one of the great enigmatic individual artists in music. And we were opening for her, which was amazing in itself. But then we went out on stage, it was the Hammersmith Odeon. So it's also thinking about that's where Ziggy Stardust did his last show. Right. Walked in on stage singing, and I see in the audience Billy Bragg, who is one of my biggest heroes. Literally one of the reasons why I decided I wanted to do this. I remember going to see him. I'd seen him once before, opening for the Smiths, and I was kind of amazed by him. But I remember going to see him in 1988 when he played, which was right around the same time as the first Bare Naked Ladies show. And I remember seeing him playing at the concert hall in Toronto. It was the Workers' Playtime tour. And the show was so incredible because he just had this, and he still does, 40 years later, still has this incredible connection to the audience. So these songs that are at turns funny, political, sad, cathartic, inspiring all at once sometimes. And he knows about the issues. He knows where he's playing that night. He knows what's going on in that community and can talk and joke and be pointed about that kind of stuff. And he can win over hearts and minds. And it was just so inspiring to see that connection that he had to the audience and the way I felt connected to the audience, to the rest of the audience, to the music, to activism, all those things. That it was one of those, this is what I'm not just doing in this band for a lark. This is what I want to do. So then a few years later, there he is in the audience. And, my mind's blown. I'm very nervous. And then shortly thereafter, we get this invitation to open for him at the Hackney Empire. He was doing 3 nights over New Year's at the Hackney Empire in London. And we came and opened for him there. And he popped into the dressing room before the set one night, and he just said, "What a good boy. Best song of 92." And then left the room. And that was that.
And your heart went boom.
Yeah, exactly. And then we toured with him over here in the summer of 95. And then I haven't seen him since until this tour.
Well, that's crazy and great. He's got one of my favorite lyrics of all time, but I'm not thinking of it at the moment because I wasn't expecting to have to recall it. So my brain is going through the card file going, what is that lyric of Billy Bragg's that I love? But I have all of his albums too. So another favorite of mine. Well, let's back up everything. You grew up in Toronto, right?
Yep.
Or the Toronto area. Currently, Syracuse is home?
I live, just outside of Syracuse, New York.
Okay. So a change in lifestyle. Did you have siblings?
I have a younger brother.
A younger brother. Okay. So what kind of kid were you? Were you the class clown? Were you a good student?
I was a very quiet, very shy, very introverted kid. I was as a very young kid, I was kind of, just very soft, very shy, quiet, sensitive, cried a lot, But I also had a real sense of humor. I loved to laugh. I loved to be creative. I loved to draw and listen to music and make up stories. And so I found friends at school, just complete nerds. I was a total nerd just like that, and had other friends like that we could just make up kind of amazing fantasy Wes Anderson worlds. That's why that stuff resonates with me as an adult, because it feels like how I was as an 11-year-old. And my brother was about 3 years younger than me, and he loved music too. He was much more outgoing. He is much more outgoing, and he was much more sporty. I had no athletic abilities at all, still don't. And but we did share a love of music that was probably passed down from our parents. But we would obsess over the same things. And I think being the older brother, whatever I obsessed over, he would then as well.
Sure.
But and I think we still share a lot of the same taste in music.
Where did your sense of humor come from?
My parents certainly liked to laugh. I wouldn't say either of them are comedic. Honestly, as a kid, one of my heroes was Jerry Lewis. It's just not. That's not language-based witticisms. That's physical humor. But I was obsessed with it. I will die on that hill. I think I agree with the French. I think he's a genius.
Okay.
I think physically. I mean, like, I think there's lots to laugh at about Jerry Lewis. But God, as a physical comedian, like, still to watch like the stuff in The Bellboy, I will just laugh every time. Even though I've seen it a million times, I will laugh every time. But so I think that was it. But I always had, like, my relationships with my friends were always based in kind of jokes and fantasy and wordplay. I loved wordplay, and I loved it from music that I heard, whether it was like folk music or I was trying to decipher what people were saying in songs. Like, I didn't understand what that meant. Spending a lot of time like reading the lyric sheet on albums, and then things like, when I discovered Monty Python and of course SCTV in Canada, that was on all the time, and we grew up so influenced by SCTV, and still are. I think that's just, we were so lucky to have that kind of as part of our culture. So, when the Bob and Doug McKenzie album came out in the early 80s, like, I went to see that movie like 4 times in the movie theater. I listened to that album. I memorized it. Same thing, like, memorized the Monty Python Holy Grail album.
My favorite album of all time, my favorite movie of all time, is The Holy Grail. So yeah, I get it. But that clever lyric, I think, comes from what you were talking about, the fact that you have that ability to have that twist of word and have something. Oh,
well, and I was always an avid reader, and I think that's the thing. I think, it's a bit of a cliche, but to be a good writer, you really do have to be an avid reader, and that doesn't matter. You don't have to actually read them off the page. You can, because I know sometimes it's hard to actually get into reading a book, but listen to an audiobook, like something where people have taken time to organize words into phrases and then sentences and paragraphs that all are there for a reason. Like, everything is there for a reason. That makes better writers out of all of us too.
Did you do any theater? Because you have a big booming voice, and that I would imagine comes from being a theater guy.
I did. Like, as a little kid, I remember I was, I don't know, second grade. I remember singing in the chorus in The Wizard of Oz at my elementary school. But my dad always says, like, that was me, shy, quiet little kid, and I'd walk out on stage and then all of a sudden just kind of come to life on stage. For some reason, I mean, even as an adult, it's easier for me to go on stage in front of 10,000 strangers at a sports arena than it was until fairly recently. For if I was sitting at someone's house and someone said, "Hey, here's a guitar. I want to sing us a song."
Is this one-on-one making you uncomfortable?
This is fine because it's an interview, so it's work. It's work. It's not really work, but you know what I mean. Like, I've got my work hat on in a way. But if I'm in a place where, like, I'm with 6 other people and it's a party or something like that, that would make me nervous. Until recently, I think, honestly, until I started doing my live streams, where I just started exploring every song I've played. Since I started doing that at the beginning of the pandemic, I've played every song I've ever written, at least once, if not multiple times. I've gone through every album I've ever done in order and backwards and forwards, and done covers. Like, I was never in cover bands as a kid. I'm still, I'm not that kind of instrumentalist. I picked up the guitar. I played piano.
I was going to ask the next question. You're actually beating me to it.
Yeah. I can feel it.
That's good. Thanks.
My parents signed me up for piano lessons at age 5, and I could not get my left and right hands coordinated. I still barely can now, but then I could not. My brain didn't work that way. And my dad would tell the piano teacher he's going to take lessons, but there's no guarantee he's going to practice, and I'm not going to make him, which the piano teacher hated. But he said, well, you don't have to, you don't want to take them. If you don't want to take them, don't do it. So I went and I took lessons, and I hated practicing. The best thing I did was probably, my dad would set up, my dad played drums in like a wedding band. So he was a good drummer, though. And he had his drum set up in the basement, and he had a piano there, and he'd sit there with he'd give me sheet music of like standards. But I would buy pop songs, Lionel Richie, Hello, or whatever.
Favorite song of mine.
And it's a pretty great song. But, it's all, or Against All Odds by Phil Collins. Kind of like, go for the cheese, but, as a 14-year-old.
Gets you in the heart.
That's right. And, there's my dad holding down the beat while I'm kind of like trying to read the music, figure out what the next chord is. But that totally prepared me for being in an actual band. Like that idea of like listening to each other, him waiting for me, or that kind of thing was like, oh, that's that give and take that actually happens off the page. And
off the page,
pun maybe intended. And that was probably the best lesson I had as a young person, was to listen and wait and figure out what the other person is doing. I still hate to practice. I still do. It's like in Bare Naked Ladies, we would rent large
warehouses.
And hockey arenas to do pre-production in. And basically, some of it's so the crew guys before your tour can hang the lights and the PA and get all that stuff sorted out.
Practice.
But you're also supposed to be rehearsing and running the show. But we just stood around and snacked. And like that was the thing that the actual going and playing the songs. If there's no audience there, boring. Right. So boring. Right. I still feel that way. But not every musician is like that. That's just how I go. So as a kid, I picked up the guitar because I started writing songs. I started having, I had ideas for melodies and like little snippets of stuff as a young kid. But by the time I was about 14 and I wanted to express what was in here, or I wanted to express jokes like with my friends and stuff, making up songs that made us laugh. We started to kind of figure out hearing things in punk and indie rock, and like you'd hear a band like Camper Van Beethoven or the Violent Femmes that had humor and angst or whatever together. Like that was like really inspiring for us. So I started to pick up a guitar and figure out how to play some chords. And I was not really interested in learning to play Tom Sawyer or whatever else like other friends of mine did. Like so Ed Robertson and Jim and Andy Cregan and Tyler and so on from Bare Naked Ladies grew up doing all that. So it meant that they had all this expertise when we started the band that I didn't have to have. Also, right. I could bring the wordplay and the melodies and the energy and stuff, and trust that they had my back that way, and then they could listen. And same thing, I learned to listen to them. But most of my training was really as a vocalist. I sang in choirs as a teenager. There was an all-city Scarborough, Ontario youth choir that I was in for most of my high school career, and we went to England on a trip one summer, like sang at cathedrals around England, went to Westminster Abbey and stuff like that. It was pretty awesome.
That's pretty cool.
And then I sang in the choirs in university and some other kind of semi-professional ones and stuff. And I love that. I love singing with other people. That discipline of singing exactly what's on the page and learning, kind of working different parts of your brain, but then also just there is this intangible thing that happens when you sing with other people, especially like if you're in a tenor section and you're singing with all these other young men who are all trying to sing exactly the same thing, but there's different timbre and there's different breath control and there's different pitch, and you make this sound that can't exist without those exact people in that exact moment. I think I've just spent my career chasing that.
Was Scary Movie Breakfast the first band you were in as a kid?
Yes. So Scary Movie Breakfast was myself and my best friend Jeff Poundset. And
originals? It
was all originals. I think, the only thing we did that wasn't, we did the Roadrunner theme, which then BNL, Bare Naked Ladies used to do. We did on our first tape as well. We had kind of a folky, bluegrassy version of the Roadrunner theme. But Jeff and I where other kids, when their parents would go away for the weekend and they'd have like a beer-soaked party, we would instead, when our parents would go away for the weekend, we would rent a 4-track cassette recorder and get a bucket of KFC and make up songs and record them all weekend.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was amazing. And we'd laugh. We would laugh all weekend. And then we'd, mix that tape down and dub it and give it to people at school. And that's really how I got to sing with Ed Robertson, with Bare Naked Ladies, was he had a copy of that tape, and we were working together at this summer music camp, and he walked up to me he had his guitar. He's like the guy with the guitar. And he walked over and he was singing one of those songs at me. So, of course, I was flattered, and I started singing in harmony. And there was this, we didn't say it at the time, but I think we both knew that there was this, our voices just matched perfectly.
Spark.
And, we just wanted to sing together all the time from that point on.
That's cool. My guest on Acoustic Alternatives is Stephen Page, and he's here to talk about his career. And we're doing a great job of exploring the past. I think a relatively newer song would be a good place to jump to, just for the heck of it. Because
sure.
I don't know what you want to do, but
let's do the kind of the opening of my solo career. This is a song from the beginning, from the Page One album called "A New Shore." As captain of this band of merry sailors, I'm a black mark, I'm a failure. But before you watch me drown, I'm relinquishing command for something I don't understand. This man's about to turn his whole life upside down. I set a course for a new shore. It looked the same as the one before, and I forgot what I'd been sailing for, and why I thought this time would be different. I do most of this by feeling, let go of the wheel. The constellations do the navigation on their own. Whilst yearning for adventure, dreading censure and absentia, I would rather be at sea than be alone. I set a course for a new shore. It looked the same as the one before, and I forgot what I'd been sailing for, and why I thought this time would be different. Off the shore with you, you said there wasn't anything but fairy tales. I showed them it was you, I told them you were everything a fairy tale could be. The boat sails by, the shore remains, and so do I. I swear this time will be different. I settled here on a new shore. My lips were blue and my legs were sore, and I forget if I was pushed or I jumped overboard. And after all this time, what's the difference?
Stephen Page is my guest on Acoustic Alternatives. I'm John Bommarito. That's called New Shore. You can find it on the album Page One, which I believe is still in print somewhere.
It is.
So.
I try and keep them all in print.
Excellent. I appreciate that. We're in Grove Studios in Ypsilanti. This is a place that is serving the Detroit and Ann Arbor area for folks who want to get out of the garage and get into the studio. So if you're a musician looking for a place to make lots of noise and not make anybody angry, this is your place. Many rooms available. We're in the biggest one. This is the deluxe room.
Nice.
You can use the drums and the keyboards and the amps. We were pretty excited about the type of amp we have in here.
Because I have one like that. It's pretty good, actually. Like it's not a. I wouldn't say it's a high end amp, but it does everything really well.
Did you have any PTSD when you saw the keyboard about when you had to practice as a kid?
No, because I play the keyboard on stage, and then what I saw right away was I saw the Kawai, and I thought, I don't know, have I had a Kawai before at a show? I wonder what they're like.
I don't know. I'm not a good person to ask. I'm a huge music fan, but I managed to learn to play absolutely nothing in my life.
So last time I played like my own show, like we played in Detroit, opening for the Who.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Ago. But we played in
Village Theater in Canton.
In Canton, that's right, in Canton.
Just that way.
So and they have they didn't have a piano. They had a clavinova that had all these like beats and effects and stuff in it. So I kind of lost my mind and just played that for a good part of that show. It was a wacky. That was a wacky. I'm coming back there, by the way.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I think we're coming back in March.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
It was a great show.
It was a fun night.
I'm not to insult your friends, but that summer I saw you and your former band within like a month or two of each other. Your show was 100 times better.
Well, thank you.
I'm saying that from the heart.
Thank you very much.
I mean that. So
I'm sure their show was fun.
It was fun.
I haven't seen it.
I know. It's still fun, but it's not the same. I'm not going to dwell on that. We're going to move on. We're talking briefly about your past. Well, actually, a little bit more than briefly, but you mentioned you went to university. How close did we get to not having you? Did you study something you were seriously going to go into?
Well, I was just studying. I was working on an English degree. I dropped out in my fourth year.
Okay.
Because Ed and I, we were just a duo at the time, and we were getting more and more gigs. And we were going to see gigs all the time, and I was going to school less and less. I wanted to be a writer. I mean, I thought that meant that I would be a teacher, hopefully a university professor or something is what I was aiming for, while I could write poetry and, maybe. And I was like self-publishing chapbooks of poetry and like in that world at least at that university, at York University. I was thinking small, which it's great. I didn't have kind of grand dreams of stardom. I thought if I could make a life in the arts, I'd worked as an assistant at a small literary magazine, and I really fell in love with that world. But we were having so much fun, and Ed and I we pretended it wasn't a real band. Like he had a cover band that he played in, that was kind of his real band, and I still had Scary Movie Breakfast going, but Jeff had gone away to Kingston, Ontario for university, so we really weren't doing anything anymore. So because it wasn't real, there were no stakes. And because there were no stakes, we could do whatever we wanted.
Just fun.
Yeah. And we only started having this band because Ed's cover band had broken up. And he had a gig booked. It was a battle of the bands outside at Toronto City Hall to benefit a local food bank. And they called him 2 weeks before the thing and said, "You're still in, right?" And he said, "Oh yeah, of course. But we've changed our name. We're called Bare Naked Ladies now." And then he called me and said, "Got us a gig." I was like, "You what? You told them we're called what?" Like it was a name that I'd come up with as a joke. Yeah. And that was the first thing he could think of. And then we went to this battle of the bands, and we were supposed to rehearse, and we never did. It was like, "Oh, I can't. I got to go to this picnic with my parents," or I can't get the car. So we never ended up doing it. So we met at City Hall that morning and gathered in the parking garage and said "Do you know I Still Miss Someone by Johnny Cash? Do you know Purple Rain or Raspberry Beret?" Whatever. We just did covers and a couple of these Scary Movie Breakfast songs that we knew. And we went up to the organizers and said, we'd probably be better if we didn't compete. What if we just went up between acts while they're setting up and tearing down, and we could do a couple songs? Mm-hmm. And they went, "Yeah, that's fine." So we did 2 songs, and then the next band played, and we practiced 2 more songs, and went back up and did 2 or 3 songs, and we just did that over the course of the day, and then we won the Battle of Bands, which we thought we had taken ourselves out of the running for. And then after that, we thought, we can't change the name now, because what if somebody saw us and they liked us? So we were so not serious about it that it was just the easiest thing to do. And so I was in university and we got this offer. Our favorite thing that we used to see, we were influenced by, that was the time of the first Proclaimers album, and we absolutely just lived and breathed that. I heard the record and I called him and said, "You have to hear this now." And we just listened to it over and over and over again.
I worked at a record store when that came out. We played it a lot as an in-store pick.
It was I know it all, and the second record, but yeah. I just know them so, they're just in my bones.
There's a train.
Trains.
Time for a train song.
All right.
I don't think anybody else
don't ever play with guns till I saw the man. See, I don't play covers.
Okay.
Anyways, we had the Proclaimers were a big band for us, and there were several others, but one was this comedy group called Corky and the Juice Pigs, and we just loved them. They were a musical comedy group, 3 guys, one of them played acoustic guitar, and they were like the Three Stooges meet the Ramones, just this fast pace, bang, 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 bit, 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 song, song, song. It's so funny. And then elements of improv in there as well. Like we'd be crying, laughing all night. And so we gave them a tape, and we'd make these tapes in, Ed's basement or my basement or whatever. And, they didn't listen to it, of course. We didn't, we'd say, we'd show up at one of their gigs. So did you listen to our tape yet? We're the two annoying, keener kids. And they'd be like, no. But then eventually they did, and they asked us to open for them on their cross-Canada tour, playing like universities and community colleges and comedy nights and stuff like that. And we weren't a comedy group. We didn't think we were trained in comedy. We were musicians, a music group, a vocal group who did funny songs. Like if you try to do comedy in front of a comedy audience, and you're not like, you're just doing our thing, it doesn't go over as well as like that. You don't get the laughs you get in front of a music audience.
I get you.
But we learned how to be heckled, how to make a set list, how to deal with an audience, how to listen to each other, how to exist in a tight living quarters, in crappy motels and whatever else. And, our first real time away from home working. And it was so incredibly valuable to us. So when that happened, we were offered that tour. I went to my parents and was like, well, I don't know what to do. And I thought my parents were going to say, well, you can't. You must be dreaming. You got to finish your degree, and then you can do whatever you want. And my parents said, well, why don't you just take the rest of the year off, and then at the end of the year, if it's still going where you want it to go, great. And if you don't, go back to school. Okay. So I never got my bachelor's, and I'm still doing this. I did get a doctorate, though, a couple of years ago. So I think that's, it's like skipping grades in high school.
Congrats.
It was honorary, though, which they say is real. My wife says is not.
You could do it if you took time to do it.
The people at the university said it's real. You can call yourself Dr. Page. My wife said, you're not Dr. Page.
Only in the bedroom.
Anyway, so at the time you sounded like you kind of skipped the whole like playing regionally and then building. It sounded like
we did all that too. So then
that.
that was like going across the country as the two of us. And then when we got back, we did a gig where we invited our friends Jim and Andy Cregan to come and be our quote unquote band. Again, we were still like that was like a fake thing. They weren't like, we didn't think we were ever going to have a backing band.
Sure.
Or be in a band. But we invited them to come and learn some of our songs for like our second set. It was Boxing Day of 1989. And as soon as they started playing, like Ed and I looked at each other like, oh, we can't ever go back from this. This is it now. And then they both sang. So we had 4-part harmonies that we were working on. It was just amazing. So at that point, then we started playing everywhere. And it's easy. It was easy then. There were lots of gigs in Toronto, and we were at the point where, we could do 5 gigs in a week. One night I remember we did 3 different shows in the same night, like, playing around the city. And one was like a university pub, and one was our own show at like the Horseshoe Tavern, and then one was a late night after hours party for a magazine, like, just playing all the time. But we were always very conscious of, it was pretty easy to just be a Toronto band, especially back then, when there were so many gigs, and Toronto Canadians outside of Toronto always derisively refer to that as the center of the universe. And Torontonians are kind of like, yeah, so. But
you're not wrong.
But we wanted to be a Canadian band, not just a Toronto band. So wherever we could, we'd get in the, rent a van and drive and open for other bands or book our own tours. And we got a booking agent fairly early on there before we ever had a manager or anything else. And we just loved to play and, didn't mind sleeping on people's floors and that kind of thing.
What kind of, can you remember some of the bands you were playing with? Some of the up and coming, not the big bands.
Right. So yeah, the big bands we opened for would be like bands like the Spirit of the West, or the Skydiggers were a band that gave us great opportunities to tour with them. And we opened for, the bands that you might know, like the Blue Rodeo or the Tragically Hip.
Yeah.
But other bands kind of our group that were coming up, there was one we saw a lot more friendly with, was called the Bourbon Tabernacle Choir, which was kind of this great R&B band with multiple singers, multiple players. A couple of those people are in or play with Broken Social Scene now and have. So it's still part of that same kind of world. That's our cohort of musicians. Bands like Big Sugar later, and and then we would be doing shows with bands like the Tea Party and stuff too. But that was it was a weird scene. Like the people who were slightly older than us tended to be pretty dedicated to roots Americana, and although the music was fantastic, the imaging was always very serious. And we wanted to, and they're black and white pictures looking away from the camera and that kind of thing. And we wanted to be very kind of like bold and Technicolor. And there weren't a lot of bands like that. There were bands like the Look People, which is a band that Kevin Hearn, who's now in Bare Naked Ladies, he was in that band. They were much more Zappa-esque than we were. They didn't have the same kind of dedication to the pop song structure. Yeah. And it was a lot more wild. It was more like much more like a Zappa kind of thing.
Moxie Früvous was in the same era. I'm a big fan of theirs as well. I was kind of always used to refer to them as the poor man's Bare Naked Ladies just because they never quite had the crossover.
Well, they were kind of a little bit not behind us just time-wise, like where we had them open for us several times. And then I think some of them were kind of competitive with us, but others were like we were very friendly with. Yeah. But I think for them it probably wasn't fair because they were always being compared to us. So they had to kind of measure up to our success. And they did have some really big success in the
They were great. They never transferred over to here like you guys did. Right. And there was that time eventually that America caught on. Like it was a big Canadian thing. Yep. And then eventually America said, hey.
One of those things that happened was right here in Michigan. Yeah. Was we started doing stuff like I remember that tour we did with Billy Bragg. We played is it called Meadowbrook? Mm-hmm. And so that's like getting bigger places than we were playing in other places in the United States, decent size venues. And we changed management in 1995 to Network, who managed Sarah McLachlan and a bunch of other artists, but that was their biggest. And they were trying to kind of like get radio on board. And radio throughout the U.S. were not particularly interested in us. And they always thought, well, it's a Canadian phenomenon. Like because of the fact that there are Canadian content regulations and funding sometimes for Canadian artists, Americans kind of cynically in the American music business would see that as like they got an unfair leg up, so it's not real. So they kind of always ignored that. And because here you had 89X and the River on the Canadian side of the border, so there was a lot of kind of Canadian music getting played into the Detroit market.
I had that my whole life. CKLW, same thing when I was a kid playing a ton of stuff that I wasn't hearing.
They always broke the big, that's the Alice Cooper story, whatever else, breaking artists because they're getting into two different territories and so on. But promoters would go, or radio programmers would say, well, that's not real. That's just only because it's coming from the Canadian radio station, so it's Canadian fans coming across the border to see them. But there was a station that was a short-lived station called The Planet.
Yeah, 96.3, yep.
They invited us to their
Planet Fest.
That's right.
One of the shows I saw you at. One of the 13 shows you were at that I saw.
Amazing. And I remember they realized, oh no, this is our audience that's here. These are Michiganders. These aren't it's not just CanCon crossing the border. These people are into it. We had kind of organically built up this audience. So I think the first place we ever played like a real arena was our own show at the Palace at Auburn Hills, and which would have been about 96 or something like that, 97 maybe.
I have the date somewhere on a piece of paper, probably in my car still, but yeah.
And that was like the beginning of that kind of thing. But it was at that point, that's when all the Detroit radio stations really started getting behind us, and that before the consolidation of commercial radio in the United States. It meant that in different regions across the country, we had these kinds of relationships with radio stations and their audiences who kind of went, this is our band. And it eventually happened in Detroit as well, and happened in Atlanta, and happened in Chicago. And each kind of, you get these audiences who really feel like these are our guys. Yeah. And then we got very lucky when they deregulated radio ownership, and basically Clear Channel could own every radio station in the world if they wanted to, because it was about you were only allowed to own so many stations in one market and that kind of thing. There were no regulations that way anymore. What happened was all these people that we built great relationships with, programmers and so on across the country, came and said, these are our guys. And then somebody from another place said, these are our guys. So by the time we were ready to put out the Stunt album, which had 1 week and it's all been done on it, and it was huge, it was like perfect storm for us. I would never say that deregulation of radio would be a good thing, but it was. We happened to get very lucky.
Just one thing.
Yeah, it was good for one thing. Just like I think the biggest year in record sales of all time was 1999, which was when our record out. So we, again, very lucky.
Yeah.
I was probably a disproportionate number of records sold. Thank you, America.
Fun fact about that Planet Fest show, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that backstage is where God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen and another song that never came out was recorded.
You are absolutely right. That is where the recording with Sarah McLachlan of God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen
I know
recorded.
Things. I know people, and I know things.
Amazing. who else was on that show? Do you remember?
I'm
getting
Dishwalla, maybe?
Yes, they were.
Not Dog's Eye View.
Maybe Dog's Eye View were on it.
Furf Pipe?
Furf Pipe, yes.
Brian Vander Ark has been a guest on the podcast. He treats me
Were
like
Semisonic on that too?
I don't think so.
That was a later one.
Again, I went to my spreadsheet that I've created with all my concerts because I'm a geek.
Because we did a bunch of shows with Dog's Eye View at that time, so it wouldn't surprise me.
I can't remember.
If he was on
anyway.
it.
All right, song.
All right, what do you want? I was thinking of a newer one.
Yeah,
Does
yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah.
Something off the last record from Excelsior called "The Golden Age of Doubling Down."
Doubling down, try and catch me now, as if you know how. If the olden days are coming back around, you can count me out if there's any doubt. So I'll offer you a moment of grace, just in case you misunderstood. You wouldn't say that straight to my face, oh you would. Well, of course you would. In the golden age of doubling down, just watch me now as I take a bow. If the olden days were half as good as the days we're in now, you can count me out if there's any doubt. In the golden age of doubling down, we're in crazy town, run by circus clowns. And if somebody suggests we take the temperature down, well, without a doubt, they'll be ushered out. You just speak the truth that needs to be told. You're so bold, you're a 10-year-old. When the cruelty is the point, I can tell. This is hell, this is actual hell. I woke up early from a wonderful dream, refreshed and energized by what I had seen. When the voice of God spoke, it was totally woke. The internet exploded in a puff of white smoke. In the golden age of doubling down, and you're wondering how we could be here now. In the olden days, they got so good at pushing folks around that they're freaking out. I can sort of out. Oh, I thought there might be some disconnect. I suspect I was incorrect. And if you can't say anything nice, my advice is to say it twice. Oh, in the golden age of doubling down, though I don't know how we survived till now. In the olden days are coming back around. Let's go underground for an ultrasound. You can tell me this is not who we are. That's bizarre. This is who we are. When it feels like nothing's left to defend or amend, this must be the end. This must be the end of something, I guess. This must be the end of something, I guess.
Stephen Page is on Acoustic Alternatives, the podcast from Grove Studios. You can find that song on this record that I'm holding in my hand. And I always had trouble saying that word for some reason.
Excelsior.
Why? Why do I have trouble saying that word?
It is a bit of a mouthful.
Yes. I have trouble saying jewelry as well. I have to slow down when I say that word.
Jewelry.
I don't know why. It's a
Jewelry.
problem. Jewelry. It's a weird word. Is that an accidental or a purposeful reference to an older song when you say if you can't say anything nice.
And no one said that out loud to me before, but I've been waiting for that question. I would say when I came up with the rhyme, I thought, oh, can I use that again? But then I thought, there is no rhyme in it when in the Bare Naked Ladies song. So I thought I can, yes. Absolutely. And really, it kind of adds new dimension to the old song. Yes, there is a Bare Naked Ladies song, which was oddly enough like a bonus track, which it's too good a song for a bonus track.
Yeah.
But it's called Why Say Anything Nice? Why say anything nice when you can say nothing at all?
Was there a time, especially in that period when you guys were doing well, that writing was more of a chore than something you enjoyed?
I think we enjoyed, it's a bit of a cliche to say you enjoyed having written. Like I think for Ed and I in that time frame, the Bare Naked Ladies are me / our men. Like that's a double album of stuff. And some of that was stuff that was like almost got on Everything to Everyone, but then didn't. And like for creative reasons, for political reasons, for space and time. Or it was like, oh, if it put it on this record, it won't get the attention that it needs, that kind of thing. So there's some of that, but also like we would get together every day, Monday to Friday, and write. For that record and for Everything to Everyone. Actually and probably Maroon too, until we had a record's worth. And we had 30-odd songs when it came to the time to do that record. So we were satisfied with that, but then we would go to our rehearsal space and work out those songs, for quite a long time before we went into the studio to do it, it was a trip to be able to just go to work, but the work is making music.
I get paid for this?
Yeah. Some of it was a ton of fun. So the writing, like for Ed and I, we'd be crying, laughing. We'd have days where we're just like, that's it, like crying, laughing, or crying because I can't believe we just came up with that rhyme or that line. It's, an amazing feeling. But then there's other days where you just sit there and you leave dejected. We used to try to say, well, we're not going to leave until we have a song. But we also were never going to settle for stuff that didn't work. Like we very early on would say stuff to each other like, no placeholders on this record. Because what happens sometimes when you're writing songs, sometimes you'll put a placeholder line in just to fill the space, and then they end up staying there.
Studio.
So yeah, Studio is a great example of that. It's just there to fill that space, and then it stays. And if it's in the middle of a verse somewhere, it just ends up, you look back later and go, oh, that's just a filler line. I forgot or declined to actually put in the work to make that right. So we were always like, we used to have songs have to be airtight. Sometimes I think to a fault. I think in a way they're like some of those songs on that last record are so clever and so tightly written that I don't know. I worry that they don't have the heart that they should have, but that's me overthinking it, being the guy who made that stuff. But it was when you work that closely with people, and writing is such, like, I don't know how they do, like for instance Nashville writing rooms, which is great. I think it's awesome. I've always wanted to try it just as an exercise, but like, for me, it's writing a song is making yourself so vulnerable to somebody that you really, really trust. So Ed and I really, really trusted each other. And, I've only had a few other songwriting partners. Stephen Duffy and Craig Northery are people that we deeply trust each other. So you can trust the other person to say, nah, that's terrible. Or you start to feed somebody a line because you know them so well that you might think they might be afraid to say this about themselves. But if you start to lead them in there, they'll get there. And that's what a great, deep writing relationship can do. And I've never had anything but that. But it does mean that you end up like, you can fight like cats and dogs too.
As a music listener, not when you're writing, but when you're listening, do you pick up more on lyrics, or are you more of a melody person?
I like both. Okay. I find, honestly, in my old age, and with my hearing's getting worse, I hear the lyrics less. Yeah. But it may also be how music is often mixed now, too.
Sure.
But I think as a young person, I was listening as somebody who I imagined that I was the singer in every song. I think people listen, I know people listen to music differently. My friend Susan Rogers, who produced a couple of Bare Naked Ladies records, has a record, or a book out. I think it's called Ways of Listening, but it's book that came out a couple of years ago about the different ways people hear music. She says, there are people who listen and imagine themselves in the room watching the band. And then there are people who imagine that they're in the band. And then there are people who just imagine other things, like they imagine the song being acted out, literal, or they listen and they hear colors or shapes or whatever else. So I always imagined that I was in the band. So I think I really listened for lyrics then. That taught me a lot about writing lyrics. Now I love being surprised by lyrics, like when they're actually clever, because for me clever is when it's a mix of both kind of being brutal and funny at the same time, like brutally honest, not necessarily about the writer themselves, but like about me, about the listener, like embarrassing, where the listener listens and thinks, how did they know that about me?
It happens to me.
Yeah, I think that's the point I'm trying to get. So sometimes it means I have to reveal something about myself, or I have to develop a character that I get to know so well that I can do that. And I find there's great humor in that. So, obviously Randy Newman is the king of that type of thing, but there are other writers, like Neil Young does it amazingly. And I think, contemporary, I love the lyrics on the Chapel Roan record. Like, I think that, I was joking kind of as like Lady Gaga meets Morrissey, in a way, right? Because I think Morrissey, for all of his faults, as a person, as a songwriter, one of the greatest lyricists of all time, because there is pathos and humor at every step. Everything is just a little bit too much, and also so funny. Knowing.
Dark and funny at the same time.
Always dark and funny. That's what I love, and I think I also hear music that I think the lyrics don't match my taste, and people love it, and people might even attach themselves to those lyrics. And I've learned, again, in my old age, to not feel like I have to compete with it or like show people why it's bad. I used to be like, well, but he says, whatever. And I won't say what song I'm talking about, but I know what song I'm thinking about. Now I think, well, God, if there's a way, if music does a thing for you, like it's cathartic or it's meaningful or it's moving, like don't let me take that away from you.
My younger self only really paid attention to, I think, beat, melody, etc. Didn't pay attention to lyrics until later. The best example I can give is a song my mom loved. I loved as a kid too, and then I heard it as an adult and I went, what the hell was I singing? I always get it up for the touch of the younger kind. My Sharona, a favorite song from a kid, but like I was singing that. Wait a minute.
That's the first album I ever bought with my own money.
Really?
I had other albums that I'd gotten for presents and stuff, but I actually went to the store and bought that with my own money.
It's a great album.
And again, stared at the album, at the lyric sheet. Like I knew I would have been 10 when I bought that, or maybe even 9. I knew I was listening to something I was not supposed to be listening to.
What did the good girls do that they shouldn't? Do you know? Did you know at 10?
Yeah, I knew. I think I knew it was sex stuff.
Okay.
I watched enough Love Boat at that point to know there was something going on in those rooms when someone comes out with a towel wrapped around them.
It's just funny that as a kid I never picked up on that, but as an adult now I'm hearing these songs from my youth and going,
oh, there's some stuff in there where I'm like, I didn't fully. I knew it was dirty, but I didn't understand what it was, and I hear it now. I'm like, oh my God.
I mean, even Bugs Bunny cartoons you can watch as an adult and go, that was way over my head as a kid, but now I was like, personal favorites of your lyrics. I'm just going to focus on one that I really always loved. I don't buy everything I read. I haven't read everything I bought. Did you write that? Or
I did.
That always made me go, oh, come on. How was he the first person to come up with that? That's awesome.
Sometimes we come up with a line with that and think that exact thing. Like, how am I the first? And like sometimes I will say things and I'll preface them with like, I'm sure everybody else already says this. And people go, no. And I think, okay, write that down for a song then.
I got that one.
Yeah. Because you never know. And that's like one of the things that talking back about co-writing with melodies too, or, melodies and chords and stuff. You don't want to play a nonstop game of what song is this, but to have somebody else to go, that sounds a lot like song X, and you're like, okay, what if we change this a little bit? Like, then you can actually massage that. Where sometimes if you're all doing it all by yourself, it gets pretty late in the progress in the process before you have somebody else go, that's you just sang "Take Me Home, Country Roads."
Happened to a previous guest on the podcast too. I don't know if you've encountered Stephen Kellogg in your travels.
I know.
when he was with his band, the Sixers, they had released a song, and I immediately went, does he know he's stealing Cecilia, the Simon and Garfunkel song? And friendly enough with him that I reached out to him or through the label, and I said, and other people had already done it. So they actually remixed the song, rewrote the chorus a little bit to kind of take out the Cecilia. So yeah, sometimes it's accidental.
It does, yeah, it's almost always accidental. But like that's with the Sam Smith thing with Tom Petty. What happened? But they went to him and said, "How about this? We split the song with you."
Okay,
which is great because usually with those things, like you have one little like 2-bar passage that sounds similar or has similar notes, and all of a sudden now Marvin Gaye is the writer of your song
somehow. One of the songs that I believe maybe you didn't write, you co-wrote it at least. I'm always bothered that it's not resolved. It's all been done. I'm waiting for the "I'm bored" instead of the Every time I'm like, "Where's the I'm bored?" Oh, there's no "I'm bored" because it would have rhymed, but you left it unresolved. Was that?
Oh, because it's did you just yawn and say it's all been done?
Right. Or "I'm bored" actually would rhyme with the previous line.
Right.
So I've always waited for "I'm bored" and it's never there.
No, it's not there because it just leaps into did you just yawn and say it's all been done? But yes, so you added the crowd noise, and there is a bit of Andy Cregan's wife Natasha speaking French at that point too, but I don't even know what she says.
Your lyrics for "Canada Loves You Back" moved Ryan Reynolds to tears. It's a great song, one that I'm sure most Americans haven't heard, which is crazy. Was that ever released on anything, or was it just a single?
No, it's just as a single. So it's on all the streaming services and stuff now.
Not one of your records. It didn't end up
no.
as a bonus track. Do your lyrics ever show up in people's bodies? Did they go, look at me?
Yes, that's always amazing. Like when people have something that I've written on their body. One of my favorite ones though was. It wasn't on their body, but a couple brought us this nice ornate wooden box that had the lyric that was from a song of mine called "Here's What It Takes." It said, "What we once kept hidden from our parents, now we keep hidden from our kids," and it was their weed box.
There you go. No, it's not to be hidden in Michigan anymore.
That's
it's
right.
Sort of a thing. Something that
I can tell from driving around here.
There's way too much of that. One thing that I don't really hear mentioned enough about you is not to me at all, but an underrated singer. Like your vocal ability is not recognized for what I feel it is. Like I can't imagine somebody on American Idol or The Voice trying to sing along with "Break Your Heart" at the end of that. Like that would be a great song for them to like blow the audience away. It's not a well-known song, and I think that would be to their benefit. But
I've always wanted to like hear a country singer do that song.
Yeah.
Great kind of country blues type singer or something, sing that. But I don't know. I love to sing, and it was I don't know. I know there are people out there who love the way I sing, but it's also funny. I think my voice is maybe to a fault individual in itself. Like that, where I know there are lots of people who are like, that guy's voice drives me nuts. So
okay, well, I'm not one of them.
Thank you.
Clearly, you're here for a reason. Let's see. We're going to try and cut it shorter because we're going along here. Odds, favorite band of mine. When did you decide to add Craig to your circle of friends and make him part of your band? Because I love that band as well.
I met the Odds in 1992 or early 93. We were playing in Vancouver, and one of the guys from the Odds came by the stage door of the theater we were playing and said, "I'm in this band called the Odds, and we're playing down the street at a bar where the house band there. We have our rehearsal space. Do you want to come by after your set?" And I was like, "Sure." And I knew who they were. Like they had some videos out. Yeah. They did this amazing thing where even before we did, we signed to Sire Records. Most of our cohort signed to Canadian labels or Canadian subsidiaries of international labels, where we signed in the United States. They signed in the United States because nobody in Canada wanted anything to do with them. And it was the best thing that could have happened to them because nobody knew they were Canadian. They just seemed like a great band. Yeah. And they were on
Amago.
Yeah. And it was Zoo. They were on Zoo Records, which was like the same as Matthew Sweet, which was like the coolest record in the world, a Girlfriend record at that time. So it's like, these guys are Canadian? I didn't even know. And we went and hung out with them, and they had like this cover band that they would do for money at this bar while they had their rehearsal space in there as well. And we went and just had our minds blown, like just laughed our asses off and just loved these guys. Like we were fast friends. And so we would have them. They're just such an amazing band. Great songs, great players. And we would have them on the road all the time as our opening act, like especially in the States. We'd bring them with us, and we toured all over. So I've always loved Craig. Like Craig Northery, who's one of the original lead singers and songwriters in the Odds. Whenever we put a record out, he would send me a critique, a song by song, like a humorous critique, like make me laugh my ass off of every single song on the record. I always look forward. That was my favorite part of putting a new record out. And so anyways, when I split with Bare Naked Ladies in 2009, he came down to my place in upstate New York, and we wrote a bunch of the songs that became kind of the backbone of the Page One album.
Cool.
And we started doing some duo shows together, mostly in Western Canada. And then I started getting the Odds as my backing band on a couple of my albums, which was my dream. Even when I was in BNO, it's like, if I ever did a solo album, I want my band to be the Odds, and it was. But then I also had another duo with Kevin Fox, who plays cello, and I got an offer to do 10 days of shows, residency at the Carlisle Hotel in New York City, very kind of posh, upscale, Upper East Side, black tie kind of cabaret. I didn't know how to do that. So I thought, why don't I take my two duos and put them together and make a trio? And so we've been inseparable since.
It's a great combo. I always love seeing them up there with you, because I don't think Odds toured much in America for me to see them when I was a fan. Maybe they did. I just didn't catch them.
Well, when I first met them, they were touring as Warren Zevon's band.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, pretty awesome. So he's got lots of great Zevon stories, too.
Not a nitpick, but I don't see the. It's just.
I call them the Odds.
I know.
It's just
it's
like
default.
The Bare Naked Ladies.
Right. It's a default. I was just asking, because
No, you were right, though. It is Odds. I find it hard to say.
Me too.
Maybe that's why they didn't get bigger.
Oh, I should have put the. That would have been the whole.
But there are some bands, they're like Eurythmics, no the.
Right.
And they got big. Bare Naked Ladies, no the. But yeah, no the on Odds.
It's a thing. One more question before I let you play one more song, if you got another in you. There's a song called Box Set, but there is no box set. I wonder if there was, would it be called Life in a Nutshell? Because that would make sense to me. A box set called Life in a Nutshell that encapsulates, at least the period that you were in, it would make sense.
I think it's a great idea. We were actually working on a box set right at the time when kind of my life blew up, and then the band, that chapter of the band ended, and I think they probably didn't want to spend a lot of time looking back, so I think it just kind of went by the wayside. But there was some pretty cool stuff on that box set, because it was like very much trying to organize it in the way like the song, which I think would be a cool thing.
Maybe some of those old cassettes get remastered, put at the right speed for the one that was at the wrong speed.
Yes,
that would make a great box for us, and it would, for those of us who love that song too, like, well, finally we got the box set. Of course, it doesn't have all the things you mentioned in it, but anyway, Stephen Page is my guest on Acoustic Alternatives. One more song?
Sure. Any requests?
I've got some of the albums in front of me. I don't know. Whatever comes to mind.
How about I just chose this one out of the blue. I have no idea whether I even know the words. We'll try it.
Tell me the truth. Is there nothing I can do to escape this feeling blue, except for leaving? And tell me a lie, like we're never gonna die, like we'll win with one more try, or like I love you. And I am falling, you know you feel it. I am calling, you best not heed it. My depression has gotten me choosing doom and gloom over joy. Where did we fail? It's not simple, there's no trail. We can't trace our steps and sail back where we started. And you're not to blame, and it's nothing we can name. We'll just hang our joy. I know it's hard, I know it's not fair. Things get easier when I'm not there. Whoa, whoa, whoa. And I am falling. I know you feel it. I am calling. You best not heed it. My depression has gotten me choosing doom and gloom over joy, over joy, over joy.
Stephen Page on Acoustic Alternatives, the podcast. A song that is on, which album is that on?
That's on page 1.
Page 1, thank you. That's not the newest thing you've done, Trans-Canada Highwayman, which I believe is only available in Canada.
I think you can. It's on the streaming services
Right,
out
but
everywhere.
physically, though.
Physically, you have to go to transcanadahighwayman.ca and then get some kind of like import copy sent to you.
Which is what I did to
Oh,
get
thank you
this
for doing
latest project, which features some pretty cool people. How did this band form? I know you guys did some shows before this actual record came out years ago.
Yeah, we got together, and I think our first shows were in 2017.
Bit of a gap.
Yeah, a bit of a gap. We did a tour back then. We had a friend of ours named Jim Milan, who's a Canadian theater director and producer. He's done all of like the live shows for Kids in the Hall, directed all of those. Great guy. And he had this idea for a show where 4 of us, so this is myself, Craig Northery, who we've talked about from Odds, and Chris Murphy from Sloan, and Mo Berg from The Pursuit of Happiness, 4 of everybody's favorite Canadian frontmen of the 90s and 2000s. So we thought he had this idea of like kind of, I think one of those, almost like a songwriter circle where people sitting on stools, swapping stories and swapping songs, talking about life on the road, like what we had in common, which was like what the music scene was like in Canada at that time, especially, and trying to make it in the U.S. and those kinds of shenanigans. And we thought, I think we have a better idea. What if we're the band? And instead of being like sitting on stools with acoustic guitars, we're all each other's band, and everybody sings their hits from that era. But we all swap instruments, which, I mean, Chris Murphy is an amazing drummer. The rest of us are not, but we've learned to be good ones. So we did a tour of Ontario theaters back then, and we did a few shows in New Brunswick, and that was like it. And then pandemic happened, and we started doing some of the songs we did little videos for, just as a way to we were enjoying our text chain, like keeping each other sane in those early times in pandemics when like we really needed that kind of camaraderie. So for something to do, we started doing these videos for it. And then we had the idea, why don't we do an album? Like, how do you get our stuff to exist in the world of streaming? Like, it's be silly for us to record our own greatest hits.
Yeah, new versions of
yeah,
those songs.
when 3 of those guys all have that same band still going, playing those songs. So we thought, well, what if we did an album of Canadian covers? And we'll do it in the style of like a K-Tel album that we all grew up with.
Very much.
So this album, Explosive Hits Volume 1, is all Canadian hits from 1969 to 75 and leaves room for volumes 2, 3, 4, 5, etc.
Yes. And you've done Undone, which is my favorite Guess Who song. So
Awesome.
cool.
That's a blast to do.
Yeah,
So
it's a
much
great
fun.
song. Thank you so much. Well, StephenPage.com, right?
Yeah, StephenPage.com.
There's lots of live from home videos to watch if you want to get more Stephen. Catch him on tour. Sounds like he's for the Michigan fans coming back to Canton. Yay, I'm very excited to learn that. You said you were ready to retire in a recent video, so I don't know if that's true or not.
I'm not really ready to retire. I just took a little vacation and
it felt
enjoyed
good.
not actually doing it. But I enjoy this just as much.
Yeah. Well, quite a career, quite a life, and I appreciate that you've spent so much time with me.
Thanks,
Thank
John.
you, Stephen.
Cheers.
From Grove Studios, this is Acoustic Alternatives. Thanks to Grove Studios for making this my home for 4 years now, and I hope you can join me for the next one. The next one is an artist who's a Michigan-based singer-songwriter who's just starting to write some of her own music, but has been already at the age of 18 headlining pretty sold out shows as a Taylor Swift tribute artist. But she's writing her own music, and we're going to give her a chance to tell her story on the next Acoustic Alternatives.